Just give me a countdown. Okay, so thank you to everyone for being here. And as always, I just like to recognize the fact that you all take out time out of your busy days to try to do inner work, try to become better people and work on ourselves, which is the real work that needs to be done. And that's something. It's all distractions and everything else just to make time to get here is no easy feat in the modern world. And so, with that said, today's talk is going to be on anicca, also known as change. Um, this is kind of one of the really basic Buddhist tenets. Um, it's really one of three. The first one would be dukkha, which is suffering. And you have anicca, which is change. And then anatta, which is usually translated as no self or not self. And when people usually hear change, I think most people know that things change. So it can kind of be like an obvious, like, duh, things change. I know they change. I change. Okay, what do it's something you can almost dismiss. But the point that people usually overlook is that a lot of the reason why we get attached to almost everything is because we don't recognize that it changes. Anything of value, people, relationships, friends, everything changes. And anytime you basically forget that this is impermanent, that the things that you care about or want to be a certain way will eventually change sooner or later, you suffer as a result. And and so this is kind of one of the main things we can use um, to reflect on. And in the retreat center that I spent a year at, the Essen Goenka Vipassana centers, um, change or anicca was really the primary thing, and especially in relationship to sensations. Because usually when we're angry or we're in pain or there's some sort of emotional thing going on, the first thing we forget is that this will pass. And it basically takes up our entire mind that we're going to, we better act in X, Y, and Z way because we're basically going to be stuck in this for an eternity, this suffering, this pain. We have to try to escape it by changing something or get involved in the outside world. And basically, what the Buddha discovered is that by basically being patient and knowing that this is a principle, that everything changes, that you can actually be with whatever pain or suffering or anxiety that you have, observe it, and then by having faith in this principle, sooner or later it will change, it will leave, it will, it might be there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, but eventually it'll pass. And it can be really counterintuitive, and it actually takes really a lot of faith within a teacher, which is why a lot of times around this idea having faith in whether it be the Buddha or a meditation technique, is very important because the first reaction when you're experiencing any sort of pain is, I better get out of this pain. Like if your knee hurts, right? The first reaction is, I better move right now, because we're so afraid of experiencing the negative sensations. But when you stop being so polarized between this dynamic of pain and pleasure, then you start to be able to just observe, and you start to be able to get some perspective and start to get some control, and basically are able to kind of root yourself in something higher. Whether you call that the observer or God or whatever you want to name it is fine. But there is something beyond being a reactive monkey to our existence, and we're trying to really work to get there, which is why sitting and being with our sensations in meditation is basically that practicing that principle in meditation allows us to then practice it in real life. When someone says something we don't like, we're able to be with it, not react. And the reason you can be with it, because you know it's impermanent. You know that it's here. Maybe it'll last a couple minutes, maybe a couple seconds, but it's ultimately it will pass. And even this can also play into ideas of death, where everything dies, not only in the macro sense of there being, you're born and you die, but also in the momentary sense of not being the same person and other people constantly dying and being born anew. Um, I think it's kind of harder to see because most people tend to have a lot of conditioning, a lot of karma, you could say. And so they tend to play out the same way they started is kind of the same way they finish. Maybe there's a couple key points in their life where they change to some sort of substantial degree, but most people tend to be more or less the same person, same ideas, same beliefs. And by going inside and starting to do the spiritual work, it's basically a way of actively growing instead of passively growing. Um, Everyone is, growing in their own way. And I think there's a certain wisdom to saying that, everyone's on a spiritual journey and everyone's trying to kind of in their own way make life a little bit better. But there are ways in which to kind of speed it up consciously and ways in which you're going to have to go through a lot more suffering. It's going to be a lot more difficult. And some people choose that path, and that's perfectly okay. But in Buddhism or any real spiritual path, the idea is that there's a more direct way. We don't have to just keep bumping into walls until we figure stuff out, that we can listen to people who are wiser than us from the, ancient teachings of the Buddha or other people. We can do meditation. There's a bunch of spiritual practices we can get involved with, and that all these things will allow us to grow in wisdom and ultimately not to be stuck in the same pattern like so many people are day in and day out, complaining about the same things with the same troubles. And so we're here to consciously evolve. So today we're kind of trying to do what they would call mostly Vipassana, because so much of what I have worked with myself has been the Goenka system. And so the way that they teach meditation is that basically you have a base of what they would call Anapana Sati. Sati meaning meditation, but Anapana meaning breath. So the idea is basically you gain concentration by following the breath, and so that your mind doesn't wander very easily. And that once you have a certain ability to sustain the mind on the breath, you can basically start slowly scanning your body from head to toe. And I'm really giving a very watered down version, which probably would be blasphemy for the Goenka people. But in my experience, I think you can work things in the micro. And if they work in the micro, they usually also work in the macro. So if you spend hours doing this, it'll also have results that might be deeper or different than you would get from just a 30-minute or 45-minute meditation. So with that said, once you have sort of a base level of control over the breath and being able to follow it and being able to have concentration, you can slowly start to scan from the top of the head to the bottom of the feet. And what you'll find is there's a lot of sensations. There may be certain sensations that are more pleasant and certain sensations that are unpleasant. And our goal is not to try to change those sensations, but to basically accept them as they are and to just observe. And as we start to observe, you'll notice that just by becoming conscious, there'll start to be a elevation of energy, an elevation of being able to observe and to kind of get a little bit of a separation between that reactive part of your mind and this observer part, or you could say again like your just consciousness itself. And so that's what we're going to try to practice. So it's okay to just do breath meditation the whole time, even with all the meditations that I always do. The base of just really focusing on the breath and even zoning out what I'm saying. I'm not a big believer in trying to guide people through their bodies, and a lot of the guided meditations people teach I've never been into because it's I feel like it's people are very individual and going through a lot of different things in their life and at different stages, and so to go through the to go through your own body at your own pace, I think is really the best thing. So with that said, let's just kind of try to close our eyes and go into meditation. Always starting out, taking a couple deep breaths, and really, the beginning of meditation really should just be a relaxation. You're just trying to relax. So it's just deep breaths, getting in touch with. We'll just take a couple minutes just to do that. Just allow yourself to relax from the day, from the stress, from whatever you've been thinking about. With every breath, just want to go a little bit deeper into meditation, a little bit more relaxed. Breathing in, breathing out. Allowing our stomach to be fully extended. And as we relax, we allow our focus just to come to the breath so we can start getting some amount of focus and concentration. And so with every breath, we're still trying to relax. We're just keeping the attention on the breath as we do it. There's nothing wrong with staying on the breath for the entire meditation. There's many traditions that just work with the breath and becoming aware of the breath. Because just kind of working the mind to a single point is really takes a lot. If there's outside noise or outside the air or anything coming from the outside starts to grab your attention, you can just recognize it. Your attention is moved, and then you just calmly, peacefully just bring it back to the breath and understand that this is part of the meditation. The act of training the mind is meditation. If your mind was already trained, there'd be no point to sit. But here we are trying to train our minds to be able to maintain a state of constant observation, of relaxation. We're gaining conscious control over our natural neurotic behaviors where we just react or upset or whatever it might be from our external situation, which ultimately always leads us back to our internal situation. And just to keep this also in line with today's meditation, just keeping in mind the impermanence of it all, of every sound, of every agitation, whatever it is, if you can really get in touch with the fact that it'll be here for this moment, but that it'll pass, it really takes a lot of the pressure or the oomph out of it. Everything is just happening. The in-breath changes into the out-breath. The mind changes from one of agitation to one of focus and concentration. Everything is impermanent. There's no reason to become upset about anything in this world because it all changes. It's all here from some period of time and then it leaves. Things are as they are. Even if we don't want a certain situation to be a certain way, still it remains that way. And maybe if we want some very pleasant situation to come, maybe it doesn't. Ultimately, your state of mind is really what determines your happiness. So as we become more and more self-reliant, we can free ourselves from being so dependent on people outside of ourselves to make us happy, on a certain situation, success, you name it. This has been the natural habit pattern of the mind. There's nothing wrong with that. Everyone here has karma, past conditioning. So just like every other human being before us, we work to free ourselves. At this point, if you feel like you're ready, try to just start by becoming aware of the sensations within the head region of the body. Just looking to see what's there. If there's a tingling sensation, pressure, pleasurable sensation, perhaps pain, discomfort, heat, cooling. So many types of sensations can arise within the body. And what you'll find is that as you become aware of these sensations, you'll see that there's more of them. That every single little bit of the body, every little pinpoint within our body, there's a sensation, there's a vibration. And then usually we're just not aware of these vibrations. Since this is a shorter meditation, we just kind of want to take bigger chunks of the body. So we'll kind of just do the whole head, the whole front of the torso, the whole back of the torso, left arm, right arm, left leg, right leg. And the order is not that important. You can kind of divide it up as you see fit too. We just want to make sure that we cover every part of the body without leaving anything out. It's the important part. And so you just kind of take a couple moments being aware of the entire head, and I'm including the neck in this as well. Allow yourself to be with whatever sensations are there. Then after a minute or two, just move to another section. The important part here is not to try to get absorbed in any particular sensation, because this can feed the habit of reacting within the mind to seek out whatever is most intense, which is a big part of what we're trying to untrain. We want the mind to be able to detect very subtle sensations. The important thing to remember about every sensation is that it is impermanent. That it changes. What is hot may become cold. Tingling sensations may become void of all tingling. Perhaps you're feeling very heavy, dense sensations in certain parts of the body. And again, here we just want to be aware, oh, there's dense, heavy sensations without giving them any more importance than any other sensation we experience throughout the body. You may notice as you scan that perhaps your awareness can only cover a certain amount of whatever limb you're trying to become aware of. And so in that case, we can kind of slowly scan from, say, the top of the leg to the bottom of the foot, making sure not to miss any spot and not giving any more importance to one sensation over another. Just make sure, if you are scanning the body, to continue to move slowly, consciously, persistently. And like always, if we start to get lost in thoughts, you want to bring it back to the sensations if you're doing the scanning or the breath. you'll find that if you can really allow this idea that everything changes to sink in, the mind will become disinterested in most things, if not all things. The mind projects this very subtle reality of permanence on this stuff, which gives it an air of importance. This even includes our own body. This body is a tool. We'll be here for some time, and then also too, it'll return to dust. The body has its own karma. It is here for some time and then leaves. And then a new body arises. And like this, the cycle of rebirth continues. But if we get to a degree, detaching both from craving and aversion as that plays out in the world and within ourselves, reach a point where this cycle no longer has enough energy to continue the next life, and then we are free from the cycle of birth and death. It is understood that this body comes with a lot of pain. I've never met anyone that has not suffered. And those who often tread the spiritual path suffer even more, because they are consciously trying to address the karmas that keep them entangled. I don't believe in shortcuts. There are things which are obviously more effective or less effective given one's particular disposition. But still, only by going within and becoming more conscious and addressing whatever karmas we've accrued due to our ignorance, ultimately, can we ever really become free. Everything changes whether we like it or not. This ego of ours wants to play God and say what should or shouldn't be. But this is delusion. To make peace with doing our best and accepting that the world will do what it chooses to do allows us to have a certain level of peace of mind. returning either to the breath or the sensations in the body. Continue to persevere. Just observing, nothing to do, nowhere to go. Just watching patiently. Just 5 more minutes to go. Really try to make your best effort to remain with the sensations, observing them as they are and observing how they change. Or continue to focus on the breath. Allowing your concentration to grow, your wisdom to grow. The wisdom of anicca, that all things change. Now, slowly start to move our bodies and open our eyes. Allowing for us to transition into the question and answer time. Or not question and answer time, or we just sit around and meditate some more. Or a topic too. Doesn't have to necessarily be a question, but the topic works as well. Anicca is the Pali word. So the Buddha, like dukkha would mean like suffering. So they call it the three characteristics of existence. So you have dukkha meaning suffering, even though people like to translate that as like, some people think of suffering as too extreme. It's like everyone's not suffering, so they're like, what are you talking about? But I feel like as you do more and more meditations, you realize on a very deep level there is a lot of suffering actually, right? And so I feel like suffering actually is quite works for me. But then the second one would be anicca, which is that everything changes and that and then especially in the Goenka, they believe has to do a lot more with sensations. But like I was saying, the other perspective is like the body. Seeing the body is supposed to be permanent. My relationship with this person is supposed to be permanent. They're supposed to act this way. My job is supposed to be permanent. It's never supposed to change. And of course, everything changes. And you know, if the thing out there doesn't change, then you change. And so you're basically, I know. So that's the second kind of what they call it, the characteristic of existence. And then the third one would be uh, anatta, dukkha, anicca, anatta, which basically means there being no self. So in Buddhism, self is always an aggregate, which means it's made up of just different parts, right? So we talk about like emotions, mind, consciousness, perception. And I don't know why I always forget the other one. There's technically like five, but I always mess them up. But the main point is that basically everything that we perceive as reality is made up of parts, and those parts have their own karma, and that we just basically are here for a while, experiencing all that karma through these vehicles, and that it's not really us. I mean, Buddhism goes as far as to say there is no you, and that's kind of a big thing. But you know, um, I think you could almost say too that like it's another explanation that like if you're talking about something more like God or something is being kind of an ultimate reality. Like there's something that even like goes with like nirvana. A lot of people used to say like, and they kind of refute this in the suttas, like the idea of nirvana, the ultimate reality being self. But even that would basically just kind of be beyond any sort of being. So you can't have any sort of duality, right? So anything that basically involves language is something we're not talking about when it comes to whatever the ultimate reality is. So therefore, they just use completely like a negation, right? So no self, there's no you, there's no whatever. Whatever's beyond that is just not a you, and then we're not gonna like, and it's either even if it's allness isn't you, and it just becomes this kind of more um, almost like a riddle or a paradox that's kind of unanswerable in Buddhism, except through direct experience. That we can experience something beyond all that, because ultimately we are beyond all that. But they even saying like we are, right? You're not. I mean, it gets really tricky. So you can't explain it either way. You just have to basically say, yeah, it's negation. Yeah. The thing within everything changes. Well, before I was talking about like sensations within the body. Um, I'm not sure like so like usually almost like what's a sensation, or it's like because everything would be like people, places, everything except for it seems like even the realms themselves from a Buddhist perspective aren't necessarily permanent. That everything fluctuates, even like the rules of the universe almost. Like there's really supposed to be like no constant, um, according to Buddhism especially. And then if you call God a constant, then basically God would be something that encompasses all change. And so you're kind of already in this other realm philosophically, you know. Yeah. Mm. I don't know if that really answered the thing of, yeah, be both. But especially within meditation, especially for the Goenka tradition, um, it really comes down to sensations because we're really trying to focus on the things that we're experiencing, right? Because almost everything we're reacting to is something that we're perceiving externally or internally, right? And I guess you could, if you maybe have like some sort of, if you're being aware of subtle realms or something, or some sort of archetype of something, this is all fine and well. But for the, as far as the meditation is concerned, the idea is that the thing we're mostly reacting to is always some sort of pleasurable or unpleasant sensation within the body. So like, hmm, not shape shifting. It would be more like that. That just like whenever we see somebody, like if I see someone I don't like and I say I don't like them, right? It's because there's also going to be a sensation within me that's not pleasurable, right? Somewhere within the body, there's going to be an unpleasurable sensation, and that's the thing I'm ultimately reacting to. So they basically say the point at which we can start to free ourselves from this chain of constant reaction of craving and aversion is at this point of sensation, because there's always a sensation in the body um, that that we can link back to our reaction, and that's like the premise. I mean, I've had a lot of like I really love the Goenka system because it's probably the one I also spent the most time in, but it's just so tangible. It's like you can really feel, oh, there's pain, and being aware of the pain and watching your mind slowly transform. And it makes it all very like, just experiential, very direct, It's nothing philosophical or abstract. It's just dealing with my sensations within my body and how that interacts with the world. And like just working only at that level really simplifies things, which is one thing I like liked about it a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for the question. And so we kind of started a little bit late. We got about, yeah, about 5 minutes past 9 right now. So, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Mm, mm. Yeah, just I'm going to try to like, just for the people that are on the mic that can only hear from the mic. So it's basically you're having, experiencing a lot of sensations from like the bottom of your neck to the top of your forehead, basically. And then when you focus on it, is it more or less you were saying? Okay, if you focus, it goes away. And then if you start going somewhere else in the body, uh-huh, the sensations start to become stronger. Yeah. So usually you'll notice that when you become aware of sensations in general, it's really a trip when you first start to discover this. Like even with like really intense pain, you'll find that you're aware of it and you start to like really penetrate the pain. You're like, okay, what actually hurts here? Okay, there's a sensation here, and then maybe the sensation's like this wide, maybe it's about the size of a baseball, right? And you start to like, where's the epicenter or whatever? And then you'll like notice that just by trying to perceive it, that it's really hard to narrow down pain as the mind becomes very sharp, even in meditation, you can almost focus and just disperse all your pain and sensations. But the mind tends to like ebb and flow. So sometimes you'll have really good concentration, and then sometimes it'll be really poor because a lot of stuff comes up. And so it's almost like, I remember the first time I experienced this, I'm like, I'm gonna have a superpower. I can just heal myself. Like anytime I experience pain, I'll just focus on it and I'll never have pain in my body and everything's gonna heal. And then you kind of realize, oh no, it's a lot more tricky because things tend to like your own concentration tends to go up and down. And as you go deeper, deeper things also tend to come up. And so you'll definitely have spaces like that. And so it's really just, I think when you're conscious of it, it tends to be consciousness itself is very light almost. And as our perception and our concentration improves, it makes things lighter, like a ray that's just frying everything, and it tends to make it less dense. But it can have the opposite effect, like too, if you start reacting. So if I'm focusing on pain and I say, "Oh, I hate this pain," right? Like it's like really subtle, like, "Oh, I just really don't like this" or whatever. But you're aware of it, it'll start to intensify a lot. So, um, but the general rule of thumb is just like when you start experiencing like a wide variety of sensations, is that it's pretty much irrelevant because there's almost infinite amounts of sensations that you'll start feeling in different spots. Sometimes it'll be your back, sometimes your face. I've had parts where like your third eye type of thing is like bulging or something, right? Like it's just there's this huge range of stuff. And almost always, if you're just really observing and continuing the practice, it's just purification. Kind of like with anything you would start to purify, you're just going to get a lot of the body reacts in different ways depending upon what you're purifying, what karma is it from. Like I just, for me, I've always gotten a lot of really dense kind of um, painful stuff, I think, from a lot of maybe even like warrior S lifetimes, which is more me like kind of pontificating about that, which is probably not the best thing to do. But nonetheless, there's always been a lot of dense stuff in my legs and body from just jujitsu also probably plays a role in that. And, you know, at the end of the day, I've had, the whole range of experiences when it comes to sensation. So unless it's basically they're like preventing you from meditation, or if it's you know, like the thing is when you start doing a lot of meditation, especially, and you start experiencing new things, everything you experience, like, oh, what's this? This is amazing. Or like, if it's not even amazing, it's like, oh, I didn't even know that was there. Maybe you realize there's like almost like a ball in your head or something, and just like, I didn't know there was a ball in my head of like energy or something, or there's like another thing over here that I had no idea about. And so that process of discovery, especially in the beginning, you'll find the mind always wants to just latch on to something, right? It always wants to like find a movie, something interesting, like a song, right? And and you'll notice in meditation, it's like looking for things to have like to kind of investigate, to take issue with, or to like even the knowledge thing, like a lot of times it'll just like you want to know more about this or that. But at the end of the day, almost always the best way is just to know that it's all impermanent. So whether it's a bunch of tingling in the face or there's no tingling, or it's like there's something really unusual that you've never experienced, all of it ultimately is impermanence until you transcend the whole thing. And because it will get you will go deeper and deeper, and you'll get more and more insight and um, about about yourself ultimately. And that's what it's all about, is that insight about yourself. That's why we're observing, and we're purifying really that like our subtle bodies is what I believe a big part of it is as well, by just observing and not reacting, retraining it. Yeah.
In terms of the purification of the sensation, once it once it's purified, like
So there, so it's not the sensation we're purifying; it's our reaction to the sensation. Just kind of make that a little bit like a subtle distinction. Um, and so as the basically the thing is actually the whole body, especially in Goenka, they talk about this, where the whole thing basically becomes completely emptied out, except for these very, very subtle sensations that you'll experience. And um, and then basically like once the mind also too becomes silent, and then there's levels beyond that. Um, and it depends. Like I'm not a big fan of the level thing. Like even in like the Goenka stuff, they have like different levels you go through in meditation, and yeah, well, it's different. It actually comes from the commentary, the one that they talk about in the Goenka tradition. What's it called? I'm spacing out on the name now. Bungala or something like that. Like a B anyway. It's like basically the whole body completely opens up and it's all just subtle sensations. But
that's just how they are every
yeah, well basically they would go from that, and then they're supposed to go through basically like the spine, and then it goes through each like chakra, and then eventually it just keeps going subtler and subtler and subtler as you continue to purify. But this is supposed to be like happen over the span of like almost very long periods. But I also believe in like multiple lives, obviously, within that context. So some people also too just hear about this, they start scanning, and maybe things like get very subtle very fast. But at the end of the day, that subtleness should allow us to deeper. perception. So I believe there's a space of meditation where you no longer need instructions. And I think a lot of that stuff is like even when the body completely opens up or your mind starts, you stop having thoughts, but everything's just completely intuitive and just knowing like instantly. You're basically at a space now where you're basically going to know what to do intuitively, and you should really just follow that. It's kind of my 2 cents. Yeah. It's kind of like you've now done enough work where you can directly interact with your higher self or your guru almost as being part of your, like, as being that enlightened being within almost. Your inner Buddhic nature, even you could say it kind of that way, right? So you can directly interact with that, and now it'll guide you from then forward. Yeah, because I found that to be more like a universal thing when it comes to like a lot of the higher states, and you're going to experience this and this and this. But then you go to another tradition, you could see someone who's liberated, and they never talk about any of that stuff. So I tend to prefer to stay more of in a universal mindset. And to me, that higher intuition, really kind of freeing ourselves, gaining concentration, all these type of principles is really what it's all about. And just once you understand those fundamentals and you get to yourself to a space of being clear and you're able to sustain it for longer and longer periods of time, right? Especially when like you start crossing where it's like meditation and acting in the world are one and the same. We can almost maintain that state, which is another big whole kind of stumbling block that comes along. Um, yeah.
Like experience a few blissful sensations during meditation, out of it, back to normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then that's part of actually like the downfall of even meditation in the West, because it always just seemed like something you're doing when you're sitting, but actually it should be training a state of being, a way of being in the world. And so actually, if you just like start to become conscious of the fact that only when you're meditating do you get these sort of states of bliss, or you start to feel expansions of awareness, and start just trying to do it all the time. Like, oh, I got 5 minutes here. I'm sitting. I'm waiting for something to happen. Let me just try to meditate with my eyes open. You can start kind of like bridging that gap because it's super important. Yeah. Yeah. No problem. Okay, so I guess we'll kind of just conclude, and I always like to conclude once again by just recognizing how awesome it is that all you come to meditation and go inside and try to do this inner work with me, because I'm also working on myself and have my own issues as well. So, we're all in this together, and little by little, we become a little wiser. And so may you all be happy, peaceful, and liberated.